Youts, Nuch Abti, Haisliduch Nugwa. Hello, I'm called Ab, and I'm xa'isla. And this is part 3 of the xa'isla Handbook. So we're going to start looking at consonants in this section. So I've written a little bit of an introduction here. So it says vowels are open sounds, which we saw in the previous video, whereas consonants involve some kind of closure of the vocal tract. So earlier on, we saw a diagram of the vocal tract with all the different parts that produce sound. So it's best to organize them not in alphabetical order, but in groups according to how they are made. So I'm going to move over to Word and show you what I'm talking about here. So if you think of the English alphabet, we have the letter A, then we have B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on and so forth. This is not really a good way to organize letters, because if you think of the letter A, what kind of letter is that? Well, it's a vowel. It's an open sound. The next letter is B. Right away, we have a little bit of a conflict here because B has no relation to A in terms of how it's made. So A is a vowel, it's an open sound. B is a consonant. It is what we call a bilabial consonant or a labial consonant. And it's because we're closing our lips before we make the sound. So open sound, and then we have a sound that starts off with complete closure of the vocal tract. Then we have C. C is capable of making different sounds, but more often than not in English, it makes kind of a k sound. And that's a sound that comes from further back of the vocal tract. So B comes from the front of the vocal tract with your lips. C comes from further back. Then we have D, which goes back to the front of your vocal tract. Then we have E, which is a vowel, an open sound. We have F, which is another labial sound. It goes to the front of your vocal tract. And then G, which can make different sounds in English, mostly G, which is a deeper sound. So just these first 7 letters of the alphabet, we see a lot of moving back and forth in the vocal tract. We're moving all over the place, and these sounds have no relation to each other in terms of how they're actually produced, how they're made. Whereas the way that I have the consonants organized in the xa'isla Handbook is first we have B, which I mentioned before, makes a B sound. Then we have P, which is made the same way, but it is actually it's different in the fact that it's actually more of a voiceless sound. So B is a voiced sound, P is voiceless, and then we have what we call an ejective P. So P with an apostrophe on top, or as I like to call it, apostrophe, and it makes kind of a popping sound, more like a p. So we have B, P, P. So all 3 of those sounds are made exactly the same way. It's just there's a difference in terms of the airflow. With B, we're using our vocal cords. And P, we're not. With the glottalized or ejective P, we're also not using the vocal cords. With M, we're also using the vocal cords. It's a voiced sound, but it ends with us closing our lips. And then this M with the apostrophe on top, it's essentially the same sound, but it's a little bit different depending on where it is in a word, in a xa'isla word. So this is what we call place of articulation. This is a much better way of organizing sounds. And if you've ever read Hein Vink's xa'isla dictionary, this is how he has it laid out. he doesn't go A, B, C, D, E, F, G. He goes B, P, ejective P, regular M, glottalized M. That's how he lays out his dictionary. So this is very helpful to know for keeping sounds grouped together. These sounds are all related to each other because they're made the same way. They're made in the same place. So this is a really effective way of organizing sounds. So I'll go back to my PDF document. The first group of consonants that we'll look at are what we call, or what are called labial sounds, which I mentioned before. So I'm going back to the top of the page here and moving over. Okay, so here on the left, we see a diagram of the vocal tract. So the lips play a very important part in making these sounds. You can see here we have B, regular P, ejective P. So these are all made by closing your lips and then opening them and releasing air. With M and the glottalized M, the regular M and the glottalized M, these are sounds that are coming through a different path of the vocal tract. So let's read through here, read the description that I've typed up here. So labial sounds, that's what these are called. So again, I mentioned before not to get too worried about the terminology. I call these labial sounds because I have to call them something. So I tend to defer to the linguistic names for everything because it's easier for me. And it's just a better way to organize things. But you don't have to remember these are labial sounds. It's not really that important to know what they're called. It's more important to know how they work. So if you can't really remember labial sounds, you can think of these as like group 1, consonant group 1, or something like that. So labial sounds are made by closing your lips and releasing the sound. So these three sounds are made by closing your lips first and then releasing the sound. These two sounds are made by keeping your lips closed and then opening them up after. So the regular M and the glottalized M. So I make a distinction because the regular M doesn't have any kind of markings. We call these little symbols diacritics. So again, you don't have to remember the technical name for them. That's what I call them because that's the technical linguistic name for them. But these are diacritics, like this apostrophe over the M. That's a diacritic. This M is a regular M because it doesn't have any diacritics on top of it. This is a glottalized M because it's made by closing your glottis. If you remember back to the previous video, your glottis is the opening between your vocal cords. So when you close your glottis, you're closing off the airflow, and that's why this is called a glottalized M. So a regular M has nothing on top. Glottalized M has an apostrophe on top of it. And these are what are called resonant sounds. So this means that most of the air comes out through the nasal cavity. So that's why I have these two up here. So that regular M and the glottalized M, I have them placed in the nasal cavity because the air comes up and it kind of bounces around inside your nasal cavity, and it creates that resonant sound. So the sound resonates in your nasal cavity and then comes out through your nostrils. So I have some examples here of different sounds, words, xa'isla words that start with these sounds. And we'll go through these. So The first consonant sound is B. The xa'isla word that I use as an example of the letter B is baba'o. Baba'o. So again, going back to these diacritics, there's two diacritics in this word. So this second A has an acute accent on top of it. So this tells us where to place emphasis. So if you read this as a syllable, we have a consonant and a vowel. We're going by where the accent is on top of this vowel. So this tells us that the first ba is a lower tone. The second ba is a higher tone. And then this O comes back down again at a lower tone. And this this apostrophe is a glottal stop. So again, we're closing our glottis. So there will be a slight pause after the second A and before the U sound. And the apostrophe also causes a change in the sound of the U. So regular U sounds like oo, but this O or this U comes after an apostrophe, so it changes to an O sound. So we read this as baba'o. So looking at the accent placement, we start high, or we start low, go high, and low. Baba'o. Baba'o. And you hear that little pause caused by the apostrophe. Baba'o. Baba'o. And the meaning of this word is grandfather. So you've probably heard this word before. It's a very common xa'isla word. Next is the regular P. The example here is pu'as. Pu'as. So you notice that this U sounds like oo, and it's because of this consonant in front of it. This is a regular consonant. So it doesn't change the sound of the letter U. So normally, I talked about the default sound of different vowels, because all the vowel sounds can change depending on the situation. So this is the default U sound, which is oo. We have the acute accent on top of the U here. So this tells us we're starting at a high tone. Pu'as. Pu'as. And again, we have this apostrophe causing a slight pause. This is a glottal stop. This E has its default sound, which is ah. This is something you're going to have to get used to, because I hear a lot of people say eh when they see a letter E in a xa'isla word. It's a very common mispronunciation that I hear. The letter E, more often than not, will sound like ah. So that is something that will really help you in getting used to. When you see the letter E, think ah. So this is us. Pu-us, not pu-es. Pu-us. And pu-us means hungry. Next we have the ejective P, or the P with the apostrophe on top, or, as I mentioned before, what I call it is apostrophe. So this is more of a popped sound, and the word here is p'ala. P'ala. So you can hear that popping sound. P'ala. P'ala. And this means to work. Now we have the regular M, and the word here is mama'o. Mama'o. Very similar to baba'o. So again, we're going mama'o. Mama'o. Because this syllable in the middle is being stressed. It's got an acute accent, so we're placing emphasis on the second syllable. And mama'o means grandmother. And last we have this glottalized M. So I mentioned before that there's not really any difference between the regular M and the glottalized M at the start of a word. So this M will sound exactly like this M because there's nothing in front of it. But you will hear the difference with this second glottalized M. We have the first glottalized M. You're not going to hear any kind of difference from a regular M, but you will hear a slight pause before this second M. So we say ma, and then we close our glottis. We cut off the airflow. We hold our breath very briefly. And then we say me. So we have this glottalized M and the letter I. This is the default I, which sounds like E. So you're going to say ma, me. And then we have xa'isla. So this symbol here might look a little bit unusual to you, but we'll talk about this later on. This is called a tilted L, and it makes a sound. But we'll go through that more in detail later on as we keep going through these consonant groups. So if you put it all together, this is ma, mi'asla. Ma, mi'asla. So you say ma, and then you hold your breath very briefly here after the A, and then the rest of it, mi'asla. Ma, mi'asla. And this means friends. So this is a plural form. So mi'asla means friend, it's a singular form. Ma, mi'asla is a plural form. And there's actually different plural forms, different versions of the plural form for this word in particular. And something that's unique about the xa'isla language is that sometimes there's more than one way to pluralize a word. So just kind of summarizing here what I just went through, an apostrophe over a consonant shows that it's a glottalized consonant, meaning that you close your glottis, or the opening between the vocal cords, before making the sound. The effect that an apostrophe has over a consonant depends on what kind of consonant it is. So over a P, an apostrophe makes an ejective sound, makes it ejective, meaning you say it with more force. Another description could be explosive. So instead of ejective, you might think explosive. So like a regular P is P, and an explosive P is P. Over an M, an apostrophe creates a pause. It's hard to hear at the beginning of a word because it's a resonant sound. And also with ma, mi'asla, you're actually starting with a glottal stop anyway, just like you are with mama'o. All of these words actually start with glottal stops because you're starting from nothing, and then you're producing a sound with the first letter of each of these words. So yeah, it's hard to hear in the beginning of a word because it's a resonant sound, and more than that, it's actually starting with a glottal stop. And in ma, mi'asla, there's a brief audible pause before the second M. So that concludes the first group of consonants, which I refer to as labial sounds. Again, you can think of it as group 1 or consonant group 1. Whatever's easiest for you to remember. Again, it's not that important to know the words or the names of everything. It's more important to know how everything works, like to understand the concept behind these terms. So we'll pick up with the next consonant group in the next video.